In mere 6 months, Florida lost over $6 billion in tourism dollars. And the most appalling thing? They did it all to themselves. This is not hyperbole. This is not conjecture. It's a hard, bleak fact, cut into vacant storefronts on Fort Myers Beach and scrawled across the for sale signs now stalking formerly successful Canadian-owned residences in Clearwater. This is the tale of how Florida, a state long defined by sunshine, snowbirds, and seasonal prosperity, self-destructed its own tourism economy, not due to a hurricane, not due to a global economic crisis, but because leaders there preferred politics to prosperity. The consequences? So much worse than anyone was ready to acknowledge. For years, Florida depended on one of North America's most reliable economic drivers, the Canadian snowbird. Each winter, tens of thousands of retirees fled the harsh winters up north and injected life into Florida's economy. And in contrast to short-stay vacationers, these weren't transient visitors. They were part-time Floridians. They leased houses, paid property taxes, shopped for groceries, saw local physicians, ate out, and even had second residences. The statistics speak for themselves. Statistics Canada says that the typical Canadian snowbird household spent $33,000 per winter in Florida. That's more than quadruple the $1,200 spent by the typical American tourist on a short trip. Do the calculation, and you quickly understand that it would take 28 American tourist families to have the same effect as one Canadian snowbird household. That's not just a disparity. It's an entirely different economy, but in a matter of months, that golden goose was choked. And the warning signs were not secret. They were blaring like a code red in emergency mode as early as January 2025. Winter rental bookings plummeted by 31%. Canadian real estate searches declined 45%. Flights from Canada to Florida declined 38%. The threat was evident. Up close and personal, calculable. But rather than act, Florida's politicians shrugged their shoulders and promised that domestic tourism would make up the difference. It was an erroneous calculation. Let's be crystal clear, this implosion did not result from market forces or fluctuating currency values. It wasn't inflation. It wasn't interest rates. This was policy-induced devastation. If this much damage was caused in just 6 months, imagine what happens when the full weight of these policies ripples through Florida's economy. The real shock is only beginning. This was no accident. It was a deliberate decision by Florida's politicians to enrage the very people that kept their economy going. The fire was ignited by Washington. The federal government struck the match with tariffs, trade wars, and threats to make Canada America's 51st state. During President Trump's tenure, tariffs on Canadian products rocketed to 35%, aimed at one of America's most ancient and intimate trading partners. Why? To look tough, to posture as powerful. At what cost? Billions in collateral damage, beginning with air travel between Canada and Florida, which plummeted virtually overnight. And then Florida took that game and doused it in gasoline. Rather than soothing nerves, state politicians doubled up with measures that specifically penalized the snowbird crowd. A new requirement compelled Canadian guests who stayed longer than 30 days to register with American officials, undergo background checks, and even submit fingerprints. Cross-border travel had been easy and amiable for decades. In an instant, it seemed aggressive, inhospitable. Then came Senate Bill 2164, restricting foreign ownership of real estate under the banner of national security. The bill never explicitly mentioned Canadians, but the message couldn't have been clearer. You're no longer welcome here. And Canadians received the message. They grumbled, all right, but they did more than that. They acted. They started selling off Florida property in droves. Realtors up and down the state, from Fort Lauderdale to Sarasota, were reporting record-breaking listings. One agency confessed they used to get only 2 to 4 Canadian listings a quarter. That suddenly shot up to 18 listings in one quarter. This wasn't flighty protest. This was capital flight, the real kind, done by real people, real dollars vanishing. For Tallahassee politicians, it was presented as an ideological win, a demonstration of strength, nationalism, and authority. But for regular Floridians, the individuals who rely on snowbird dollars to have electricity and put food on the table, it's been a nightmare. Taverns, restaurants, and shops in tourist destinations such as Clearwater and Naples saw 30 to 50% revenue declines. The South Florida Business Journal reported instances of losing as much as 70% of revenue in February 2025, the midst of tourist season. Service workers were hit the hardest. Waiters, bartenders, janitors, all had hours cut, jobs eliminated, wages reduced. Even medical care wasn't exempt. One doctor in Florida said he used to see 30-plus Canadian patients per week. Now he sees fewer than 10. But the effect does not end in storefronts and wages. It reaches to the very center of public finances. Florida's cities depend on property taxes, particularly along the coastlines, where Canadians own long expanses of houses. When they sell out, the properties sit empty or depreciate, depriving cities of badly needed funds. The consequence? $2.1 billion in lost revenue from property taxes. And when municipalities contract, so do the vital services. Police and fire and schools and sanitation, nothing is immune to the domino effect. If being deprived of $2.1 billion in taxes is bad, what can be said when Florida's own identity, its image as the sunshine haven of the North, is put in the dock? The next chapter shows just how far this economic disintegration reaches. The domino effect didn't end with lost tax revenues. It spread rapidly into the very bloodstream of Florida's public services. Fire departments postponed vital equipment upgrades. Police departments froze new recruits. Schools quietly trimmed programs. Unemployment in some coastal counties is expected to surge from 4% to 6%, according to researchers at the University of Central Florida. A crushing blow to working-class families already teetering on the brink. And as Florida falters, the world beyond is taking advantage. Competitors are acting quickly, acting wisely. Mexico lengthened tourist visas to 180 days, streamlined visa regulations, and started touting low-cost private health care. Portugal and Spain launched programs promoting safe, low-cost, English-speaking communities with more robust public health care infrastructure. And throughout the Caribbean, countries came together with a resounding message: you are welcome here. It was not an advertising campaign. It was a call to action against Florida's hostility. These nations aren't just selling nicer weather. They're selling respect. And for a generation of wealthier retirees with disposable income and alternatives to consider, that respect is everything. Canadians who cashed out their Florida real estate investments are now investing in these rival markets, shipping long-term money into houses, clinics, and communities overseas. Florida lost not only short-term spending, but is also hemorrhaging the long-term investments that support entire economies. This is not hotel reservations. It's community-building dollars walking out the door. Still, Florida politicians hold on to one excuse. But overall, tourism numbers are up. They parrot it like a shield. Yes, overall tourist numbers have crept upward, due mostly to growth in domestic road trippers. But here's the reality they won't publicly acknowledge. Domestic visitors spend much less. They stay for shorter visits. They don't buy houses, don't pay taxes, and don't become rooted. It's not apples to oranges, it's apples to crumbs. Florida's economy wasn't constructed on Ohio weekend business trips. It was constructed on long-term, high-spending snowbirds who anchored local communities for 6 months. Trying to substitute them with frugal road trippers isn't just short-sighted. It's mathematically impossible. And that's the aspect politicians overlook. Florida didn't lose visitors. Florida lost faith. The treachery wasn't quantified in dollars. It was quantified in dignity. Picture investing in a Florida condo for 15 years, investing tens of thousands of dollars in a local community each winter, only to be informed you are now required to provide fingerprints and register as a possible threat. That isn't policy. That's shame. And when trust is lost, it seldom returns. Today, the fallout is taking its toll. In seasonal markets, house prices have fallen by up to 30% already. Condos that were previously sold to Snowbirds remain vacant, worthless investments with no buyers. Commercial units are defaulting as small businesses fail. And here's the scary part. When housing prices decline, the banks that own those mortgages begin to contract credit. Builders are cut off from loans. Small businesses can't grow. Families can't refinance. For a state hooked on growth, that's like cutting off oxygen supply. If Florida's economy is struggling for breath right now, what does it do when the very financial system on which it depends starts to turn against it? The next chapter shows the shockwaves no one in Tallahassee anticipated. What's to follow may be even worse: a liquidity crisis. When capital dries up, projects get canceled and jobs disappear in several sectors. And all of it, every last ripple of this financial meltdown, can be traced back to one source: politicians opting to be tough rather than smart. This isn't Florida's alone. This is a study in economic self-sabotage. It's the result of leaders pursuing headlines over facts, stability over praise, long-term prosperity over short-term ideology. The consequence is undeniable. A $6.6 billion market eliminated, thousands of jobs eradicated, whole communities shaken. Not by hurricanes, not by war, not even by global warming, but by ego. And the most terrifying aspect? This tale might unfold anywhere. Here's the hard truth: no quick solution. There's no easy way to regain trust among foreign investors and snowbirds. It takes years. It can't be resolved with a turnaround press release or a glittering PR campaign. Even if Florida's leaders suddenly change direction tomorrow, many Canadians are lost forever. They've already invested in homes in Portugal, Mexico, and the Dominican Republic. Their money and their allegiance has moved on. Florida's reputation, once golden, has been sullied. And the more its politicians hold on to nationalism and disinformation, the worse the wound hurts. Florida used to have not only a golden goose in tourism, but also in trust, reputation, and worldwide popularity. But the goose was taken for granted. Now the eggs are lost, and the very ones responsible for slaughtering it act like they do not know where the blood is coming from. This is not a cautionary tale. It's a flashing red warning signal to all American politicians. You can't insult your customers, devalue your citizens, and weaponize policy against your own people, and hope that your economy comes out unscathed. Because at the end of the day, ideology doesn't pay the bills. People do. And here's the most jarring truth of all. This meltdown didn't need to occur. The alarms were ringing, unambiguous and incessant. But politics overloaded them. If this deterioration caught you by surprise, be sure to like and subscribe. Here, we report the news other media won't touch, stories that expose the unspoken price of political gamesmanship. Because sometimes the greatest catastrophes are not nature-made, but man-made.